How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be ranking all of KSI's fights from worst to best. We'll be ranking them based off how good the fight was, along with the cultural impact they had on the YouTube boxing and the boxing scene as a whole. With that being said, coming up in 8th place, the last place, is KSI vs Pineda. Unfortunately, Pineda did not want to fight in this fight. All he wanted to do was complain and sit down and just be a bit of a pussy. Yes, it was Pineda's first time in front of the bright lights on a big stage in front of thousands of people, and it definitely got to him, and that's why he performed so poorly. Of course, in future bouts, Pineda would go on to fight for Misfits again, and his fear of stage fright wouldn't be so dramatic, and he would actually get some wins under his belt. But when it comes to this fight in particular with KSI, Pineda just did not want to really do anything. He was on his bike the whole time. He didn't really want to engage. He was scared of KSI's power, and it was just a poor fight to watch because it was a lot of knockdowns that weren't really knockdowns and a lot of just poor boxing in general. It wasn't fun to watch, and that's why it's the 8th on this list. In 7th, and right before the Pineda fight, was the Swarms fight. KSI vs Swarms. Now, this is higher than Pineda because it was a quick execution and a decent fight to watch back if you like KSI and you like watching KSI fight, and it's just a fun fight to watch back in general. However, at the end of the day, it is a boxer fighting to say a boxing novice would be a little bit of an understatement. Swarms was a straight-up beginner. He had never fought before. He had never even sparred before, and he was fighting in front of thousands of people against someone with a lot of experience, especially fighting in front of thousands of people. Swarms did have the dog in him, though. Unfortunately, that dog was a chihuahua, and it was just barking at high-pitched frequencies that did not deter JJ from absolutely killing Swarms. This is a little higher than the Pineda fight, though, however, because the Pineda fight was pretty poor to watch, and it was very long, while the Swarms fight was quick, and it was a nice, clean KO. So nothing, it was a lot nicer to watch in general. Coming up in 7th place, we have Misfits 007 with KSI vs Joe Fournier. This fight was pretty decent up until the elbow, and that's really what deters this fight from being any higher. It doesn't have the cultural impact to say a KSI vs Joe Weller or Logan Paul had, and it doesn't have the spectacle that a KSI vs Tommy or KSI vs FaZe Temper had either. It was really just a mid fight. It was very mid. KSI looked pretty good, but then he did throw that elbow by accident, and it did unfortunately overshadow the whole event and the fight in general, and no one really watches it back unless they want to see that elbow. Just above KSI vs Joe Fournier, we have KSI vs Joe Weller, and you might be a little surprised that the first ever YouTube boxing event is just this low. However, if you watch the fight back, it's not that great a fight. It was KSI's first fight, Joe Weller's first fight. They didn't look great. The production wasn't as good as it would be in later years. And in general, it's a great fight to watch if you want to reminisce about the beginnings of YouTube boxing. But in general, KSI vs Joe Weller just isn't really that fun to go watch back. And it's just not that interesting in most rewatches. It's been obliterated by the passage of time, as there are a lot more KSI fights to go watch if you're bored. Above the Joe Weller fight, we have KSI vs Tommy Fury. This is the most recent KSI fight on Misfits 10, the Prime card. And this is probably supposed to be the most cultural significant fight in KSI's boxing career and possibly in YouTube boxing as a whole. However, two big things held this back. One, KSI lost, so it really loses that cultural value. And two, it was kind of boring to watch. Don't get me wrong, it definitely had its moments, but there was a lot of hugging throughout, which you got to understand was both guys' game plan. That's why it kind of happened so much, is because KSI was meant to hold Tommy to negate that jab, and Tommy was meant to hold KSI to negate the inside work. It was a lot of holding, and it's just not that fun to watch in rewatches compared to other fights on this list. But next up is KSI vs Logan Paul 1 headgear amateur fight. This fight is probably the most perfect KSI fight the most perfect YouTube boxing fight in the whole scene. And let me tell you why. The storytelling with this fight was insane, with Logan Paul, the aggressor, starting first, the athlete coming out first, smoking up KSI, to then lose the last 3 rounds because KSI went crazy is insane. And at the time, people didn't like how it was a draw. However, if we look back on it, it was really good that it was a draw, because the fact that that fight was a draw is what made YouTube boxing a professional bout with the rematch, etc., etc. It's what lit up YouTube boxing as a whole. This is what everybody remembered about YouTube boxing at the time. And coming up in 2nd place on this list is KSI vs FaZe Temper. Now, this is probably KSI's most perfect fight. This is the fight KSI will look back on and be like, this is when I was perfect. Now, KSI executed FaZe Temper in 1 round, and that was the fight that showed people, okay, KSI is here for business. Up until this point, KSI had only proven himself against Logan Paul and like Swarms and Pineda, and people weren't really convinced. Some people thought Slim was better than KSI. People thought KSI was a mid boxer. He got put in there with FaZe Temper. Thank God it wasn't Dylan Dennis, because I mean, we know how Dylan would have fought given the Logan Paul fight, but we got put in there with FaZe Temper and executed him, and it was just a clinic to see, and it was very, very fun to watch. It's great to rewatch as well, very culturally significant. Yeah, that's why it's number 2 on this list. And coming up last and first place on this list, you probably guessed it, the most culturally significant fight KSI has ever had in his boxing career. It is KSI vs Logan Paul 2, the first YouTube boxing professional bout to ever happen. This broke records and pay-per-view sales. This was the fight. I remember being sat in a pub in Centre Parks. I think I was like 15 years old, and seeing this fight advertised on Sky Sports, and I was blown away because this was new at the time. Like nowadays, these kids are spoiled with Misfits and all that being promoted on DAZN. We didn't have that. We had YouTube, and we had the parents and the old people who had no idea what it was and thought it was stupid. And YouTube boxing was being ridiculed, so to see it on Sky Sports advertised was mental, and it broke through the boundary. There was before KSI vs Logan Paul, and there's after KSI Logan Paul. That is how significant and how culturally significant this fight is. This fight is crazy. And not only that, but it's fun to rewatch because they both threw the fucking kitchen sink at each other. KSI came out like a man possessed, just trying to kill Logan Paul. Logan Paul was more tentative, but had better boxing skill. Both scored knockdowns. There was points taken away. Action-packed through all 6 rounds. It was crazy. So, yeah, that's why KSI vs Logan Paul 2 is the number 1 on this list and possibly the best YouTube boxing fight of all time. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comments if you agree. What would you rank KSI's fights from worst to best? I'm thinking about doing another video like this where I rank all of Jake Paul's fights and maybe Nissan Gibbs as well after that. Let me know in the comments if that'd be something you're interested in, and if it is, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot of videos, not similar to this, but kind of similar to this. Go look at my previous videos, you'll see what I mean. I like ranking stuff, I like ranking YouTube boxing. Subscribe, leave a comment below, and please... Well, I know I said subscribe already, but subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and I just really want 1,000 subs. Please. Please.